For over a century, true crime lore has been haunted by the legend of Dr. H. Holmes. The story usually goes like this. A charming, wealthy doctor builds a massive, maze-like hotel in 1890 Chicago, outfitting it with secret gas chambers and basement crematoriums designed to torture people. During the 1893 Chicago World's Fair, it's said that he lured dozens of unsuspecting tourists away from these crowded pavilions and into his macabre lair, becoming America's first and most prolific serial killer. But the historical evidence suggests the most terrifying elements of this story never actually happened. Yellow journalism transformed Herman Webster Mudgett, a greed-driven, often disorganized con artist, into the character of a sadistic mastermind. The Beast of Chicago is a fiction that obscures a much more grounded criminal reality. Raised by devout Methodists in New Hampshire, Mudgett later recalled an incident where classmates forced him to stand in front of a human skeleton and touch its face. He claimed that after the initial terror passed, he found the experience intriguing. He soon began dissecting animals and, as an adolescent, developed an interest in medicine. While enrolled at the University of Michigan's medical school, Mudgett worked in the anatomy lab. It was here that he first began treating human remains as a commodity. He realized he could use the lab's inventory to defraud life insurance companies. Mudgett would take out policies on completely imaginary people, steal unclaimed cadavers to stage fatal accidents, and then pocket the payout himself. Mudgett found that death could be weaponized for profit. He spent his life refining this specific method of using human bodies as financial assets. In 1886, he relocated to Chicago, adopted the alias Dr. Henry Howard Holmes, and purchased an empty lot in the Inglewood neighborhood. He began constructing a massive mixed-use commercial building, relying almost entirely on unpaid credit from local suppliers. Because he routinely refused to pay his architects and contractors, the building's layout was constantly altered. The windowless rooms and dead-end staircases were actually hidden compartments where Holmes stashed the expensive furniture and equipment he bought on credit, ensuring creditors couldn't find his stolen property. As for the claim that he slaughtered up to 133 people visiting the World's Columbian Exposition, there is zero historical record of random tourists vanishing from his property. The 9 murders we can actually confirm tell a much more practical story. His victims were people already inside his inner circle, his employees, his mistresses, and his accomplices. They were women like Julia Smythe, who worked at his pharmacy counter, or the Williams sisters, who signed over valuable real estate deeds to him before vanishing. The murder castle was a disorganized staging ground for financial fraud. When Holmes killed, it was to settle debts, acquire property, or silence witnesses. By 1894, his debts and a string of arson investigations were catching up with him. Holmes fled Chicago and enlisted his longtime accomplice, Benjamin Pitezel. The plan was to fake Pitezel's death in a lab explosion to split a $10,000 life insurance payout. But finding a convincing cadaver on the road proved difficult. In Philadelphia, Holmes opted for a shortcut. He knocked Pitezel unconscious and set him on fire. By using Pitezel's actual corpse, Holmes fooled the insurance company and collected the money. To keep the scheme quiet, Holmes convinced Pitezel's widow that her husband was still alive and hiding from the law. He manipulated her into giving him custody of 3 of her children, Alice, Nellie, and Howard, and took them on the run. This triggered a multi-state manhunt led by Philadelphia police detective Frank Geyer. For months, Geyer traced Holmes across the Northeast and into Canada, following a trail of aliases and lies as Holmes kept the children separated from their mother. The pursuit ended in horrific discoveries. Following Holmes's trail of short-term rental houses, Detective Geyer unearthed the decomposed bodies of the 2 girls buried in a cellar in Toronto, and the boys' remains hidden in a chimney in Indianapolis. Holmes hadn't been undone by a brilliant psychological profile. It was a sloppy insurance grift that finally collapsed, exposing the lies that had sustained his career for years. The run ended in November 1894, when the Pinkerton Detective Agency tracked Holmes to Boston. Authorities initially held him on an outstanding warrant for horse theft. Once physical evidence was compiled, Holmes was put on trial in Philadelphia for the murder of Benjamin Pitzel. He was found guilty and sentenced to death. Even from prison, Holmes had one last con to pull. He accepted $7,500 from the Hearst newspaper empire to write a confession, in which he claimed to have murdered 27 people. That confession was packed with blatant fabrications. Holmes named victims who were verifiably still alive, leaning into the most gruesome fantasies possible to guarantee higher tabloid sales. Right up to his 1896 execution, Holmes's paranoia centered on the very medical system he had exploited. His final request was that his coffin be encased in solid concrete and buried 10 feet deep, terrified that his body would be stolen for medical dissection. The historical Mudgett is a man who murdered at least 9 people to settle debts and silence witnesses. The mythical torture doctor is a separate creation, his final, most successful swindle.